Megan Gray, you're the costume designer for the murder mystery limited series, A Murder at the End of the World, which tells the story of Darby Hart, a hacker and a sleuth who solves a crime at an Icelandic retreat. She's this really interesting, unique character. Did you have a lot of immediate ideas for her when you read the script?
I did. I've worked with Brit Zoll for a long time now, and I find it always very interesting. They're writing partners, but also Brit, a female writer and director, writing a story about a female. And I think Emma, as well as myself, were very drawn to the character of Darby Hart because it kind of defied all of these ideas of a female heroine and what they should look like and who they are. And Britons all are very descriptive in their writing. And in the first few pages, it's described as Darby Hart wearing basketball shorts and a hoodie and shades of red. And so I think immediately when reading it, I started to kind of conceive an idea, and then it just developed from there in my conversations with Brit Zoll and also with Emma.
And yeah, the series takes place in two time periods, so we're sort of seeing two different versions of Darby, who has changed in between the 6 years where we see her. How did you consider the differences and similarities you wanted to kind of bring to those two looks?
We knew that in 2016, Darby, still is somewhat of a vulnerable young teen who's embarking on this journey with Bill. It's the first time Darby feels love. It's the first time that she feels that she's kind of taking over and finding justice for all of these characters. So in 2016, we wanted Darby to still have a bit of a softness and to have this vulnerability there, but also not make her too young or take the audience out of the fact that these are two kids on the road solving these crimes. When we get to 2023, I think it was important for us to make sure that the audience felt the pain that Darby had of Bill leaving her and create a little bit more of her protecting herself through her wardrobe. She's a little bit more closed off. She kind of wants to hide from reality at times, whether it's in an oversized jacket or her hood being up. We wanted to show a bit more strength, still leaning into a bit of androgyny, but also having it feel powerful and sensual and all of these things. So I think there's a connection between the two time periods, but they also feel quite drastic. And it was important for us to share that. And then I think when you get into the hair, the difference in 2016 and 2013 for Darby's character is quite a big leap. So that really elevated our costumes as well.
And how do you coordinate with like the hair and makeup department, when that is also such a big part of her character? Like how does that affect the costume choice?
I think it affects it quite a bit. I worked with Josh and Anna, our hair and makeup heads, a lot. And, when we were in our beginning fittings, both with Bill and with Darby, trying to make Bill Harris is such a like a beautiful blank canvas, and the clothing was really working, but something still didn't feel sticky or right about him. And once they put in his tattoos and we changed his hair and we did a fitting with all of that, the character came to life so much more. And I think also with Darby, Emma had short hair and had dyed it pink. So when we were trying to do our fittings for 2016, the wig in our fittings was so important to actually be able to see this character. So I might start laying down the groundwork of what the costumes look like, but it really is a collaboration of all of us being like, how do we take it from this to the next step? So working very closely with them was really important.
And that love story between Darby and Bill that informs so much of the story. It's such an important through line to the story. How did you consider the way their looks played off of each other?
What it's funny when I go back and watch it in 2016, at times they almost look quite similar, whether it's the short bangs and the way, Bill's mullet kind of hangs similar to Darby's, longer hair, the colors that they might wear that blend together. And Britain's all had come up with two very distinct color palettes for the time periods. And that really allowed us to kind of play within these parameters. So when we were in 2016, Bill's a little bit older, but I believed that both of them are kids who thrift their clothing, inherit their clothing from their mom, their dad, wherever. So having that element of vintage and things that are worn in and have a life and energy of their own, I think built that connection in 2016 between them. 2023 was a bit sad. We only see Bill once. So developing the right look to reintroduce him to the audience, which, is to feel 7, almost 8 years later, we wanted to still find that link of him feeling like an artist, but also somebody who's still on this mission to tell untold stories. So we leaned into things that had a little bit more texture. His shirt had hand embroidered red circles on them. His look was, I think, very distinctive and important, and we had a lot more room with Darby to create her. But we always wanted them to feel that they were speaking the same language through their clothes. And I think we did that in ways of whether it was loose shirting and very soft colors in a palette in 2016, and 2023 it being a bit harsher with suiting and blacks and reds. And I think they look quite similar, but in their own regards as well.
There's also a whole ensemble cast of potential victims and suspects in this series. Yeah, just like any murder mystery. How did you craft unique styles for such different characters coming from such different backgrounds? Part of the story is that they come from all walks of life.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look back to some of the, very original murder mysteries, The Long Goodbye, or even something that's transferred into modern day like Clue, there's always something that really tells who the character is. So Britain's all had really crafted these characters. You had the roboticist, you had the billionaire, you had the angel investor, so they gave me this rough idea, and then you kind of start to pick them apart. So for Joan Chen's character, it was, how do we show wealth and power but not make it kind of too much or too aggressive? We wanted her to feel cold, but also you need to question if she's in alliance with Clive Owen's character or if she's on the same side of Darby. The astronaut, how do we show a female figure who isn't, too far of trying to prove femininity, but also is the right hand to Clive's character. All I was very fortunate that all of my actors came in with very like extensive notes on who they believed their character was. And Jermaine Fowler and I worked really hard to try to understand what little things would make him stand out. So he hand drew on his sneakers like all these different like sayings and photos, and it was this idea of this creative filmmaker who also really wanted to show up in his appearance and who he was. Working with Pega doing Ziba, it was important that we really leaned into her Iranian culture and the jewelry and all of those things. So we really just tried to dig deep within each character and understand even things that necessarily you never saw on camera. Raul Esparza's character, David, he had the same handkerchief the entire time that had his initials. And the only time he ever used it was at the very end when he was bleeding. But we tried to place these little things in all of the characters, not only for them, but for maybe the audience to pick up on, or to not really register it, but for it to feel real and very succinct of like, oh, that must be, the angel investor and that's the astronaut. So it was really fun developing the characters and making them all feel very, very separate without leaning too much into it feeling costumey, like something like Clue, where Miss Scarlet wears all red, or Peacock and all of these things. So we just tried to make it feel very grounded.
And then you've got billionaire Andy Ronson at the center of this retreat, representing his own kind of wealth and power. How did you translate that into his wardrobe?
There's so many different directions I think you can take with a tech billionaire. We did a lot of research and understanding of what they might look like, and some of them wear t-shirts and jeans, and some of them just wear suiting. And it really came to my first meeting with Clive. He is very, very hands-on in developing his character, and he really wanted the same silhouette throughout so that you could feel him, whether he was on camera performing or a shadow in the hallway, and it would register immediately that's Andy Ronson. So we knew that from the beginning to the end, he would be in this kind of soft suiting with the same. We made all of his shirting in New York, and we played with different fabrics and colors. And as the character gets further and further along and feels a little bit darker, we leaned into metal buttons. And the final episode, his red shirt matches the same red as Darby's socks in the very beginning. So for us, we created our own version of what a tech billionaire would look like, and didn't lean in too much to, I think, what everyone sees. And I hope that the audience felt that when they saw him, that it was kind of this same thread, but it just developed a little bit darker along the way.
Did your own personal style or aesthetic influence the wardrobe of any of the characters? Did you bring, some of yourself to anybody?
I did. I recognize myself in all of them. I had an amazing team, my assistants and my costumers, and all of us would spend time trying to say whose closet we felt that we connected with most. And I think you do always bring a little bit of yourself and your aesthetic, and in the end you start realizing halfway through shooting 4 months in that today you're dressed very similar to Bill, or you look like Darby. And I definitely identified with Darby in 2023 and 2016, of being able to show a lot of things through how you dress, and whether it's form-fitting sheer blouses or men's trousers. So I definitely connect, I think, with all of them, and brought a little bit of myself into each character.
And did you have a favorite character to design for? Was there anyone who was especially fun?
Oh, it's so hard. I thought they all were so fun. You know, Britt's character, Lee Anderson, I think was a really fun one to kind of develop, because it was, how do we showcase that this this woman who is a bit of an anarchist and a punk is married to a tech billionaire, and playing the role but not losing a sense of herself and her identity. And we kept the same jewelry on throughout the entire thing, and we kept the same boots even if she was wearing a silk charmeuse gown or men's trousers. I think her character really was one that we kind of had the ability to go up and down in her character arc, but keep something that felt very punk and real. So I really enjoyed designing Brit's character with her. And but it's hard to pick a favorite. I look back and I really do feel very strongly about all of them. Even Zoomer, I loved doing Zoomer. We had so much fun pulling vintage and creating little things that felt kind of like The Shining, but all, so all of them feel very real to me.
And working with Britt and Zal in general, what was that collaboration like with, there's showrunners, they're the directors, Britt, of course, is a co-star, so they have so much involvement with every aspect of the show.
They truly are, I think, two of our greatest talents of our time. They are so invested, they live and breathe their stories. So working with them is an honor, and you become part of the storytelling, and they push you to think further. They constantly have little ideas or trinkets that make everything come to life. They set parameters, whether it was a color story, which can feel really daunting when Alex DiGirlando and I, the production designer, had one color palette to work with in 2023. So the set design and the costumes have to all be reds, blues, blacks, creams, and how finding that balance of how do you make that all work when you have the ensemble cast sitting at a table in all of these colors with all this. And Britain's all never worried about it. They knew that it would work and it would create this visual story for the audience to see. So I feel very lucky to work with them. They champion their crew and their actors and everyone around them, and you really feel very invested and very connected to the stories that they tell.
Well, I want to congratulate you on your work on the series, and thank you so much for talking with me about it. It's been a
Thank,
pleasure.
thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time.